That night, years after she had vanished from my life, I saw Chiamaka's face for the first time, and I understood why she had spent so long hiding. But when I met her, all I saw was a cardboard box tied with a faded cloth, and yes, far too quick for a marriage proposal she hadn't been expecting. "You're not going to choose for me, mother?" Adetokunbo's voice echoed through the spacious living room, shattering the heavy silence of the mansion. The sharp sound of his hand slamming down on the glass table made the crystal glasses tremble. Funmilayo, in her impeccable dress and with her proud gaze, didn't flinch. "You don't know what's best for yourself, Tox. All your previous girlfriends have been a disgrace to this family. You need someone on your level, someone who knows how to behave, someone who won't tarnish our name." "Our name?" He leaned forward, fists clenched. "Our name is the only thing that matters to you. And me? My choices, my life? Your life, Adetokunbo, is a reflection of this family. You owe that to us," she replied, each word measured as if delivering a final verdict. He took a deep breath, trying to keep his fury in check. His blood pounded in his ears. "No, what I owe is to myself. And I'm not going to let you manipulate my love life like it's one of your business deals." Funmilayo rose, slow and imposing, stepping toward her son like a judge about to pronounce a sentence. "I'm trying to stop you from making the same mistakes again. You're incapable of choosing for yourself." Those words were the final spark. He pulled back, grabbing the car keys from the sideboard. "Enough! I'm not listening to another word." "And where do you think you're going?" Her voice rang out behind him, cold as steel. "I'm going to sort out my life my way," he said, walking out without looking back. The humid heat of Lagos wrapped around him the moment he stepped outside. He descended the wide steps and crossed the garden, ignoring the guard who greeted him. In the car, he started the engine and sped away from the mansion, as if he could outrun the weight of that conversation. As he drove through the bustling streets, his mind raced. He grabbed his phone and called Kunle, his childhood friend. "Tox? Well, that's a surprise. I thought you were locked up in that golden cage you call a house," Kunle said, laughing. "I need a favor. You once mentioned a strange girl who studies near your place, the one who always walks around with a box on her head." "Oh, Chiamaka. Yeah, everyone in the neighborhood talks about her. Never seen anything like it. Goes to school every single day with that box tied with a cloth. Doesn't take it off even in the heat." "Where's that school?" Tox's voice was firm, decisive. "Why, you going to offer her a job?" "Something like that. Tell me where it is." Kunle gave him directions, still baffled by his friend's sudden interest. Tox followed the route, driving through neighborhoods until he reached the humbler, livelier streets of the village. Children darted between stalls, the air rich with the smell of roasted corn and dried fish. He parked near the school gate. The building was modest, cement walls painted blue, the iron gate worn with age. He waited a few minutes, watching students pour out, chatting and laughing. Then he saw her. Small, thin, wearing a worn-out uniform, and on her head a cut-out cardboard box firmly tied with a cloth. Her steps were quick, as if she wanted to cross the yard unnoticed. Tox got out of the car and walked toward her. A few students glanced curiously at the well-dressed man who stood out in the scene. When she noticed him approaching, she hesitated, as if ready to bolt. "Are you Chiamaka?" he asked, keeping his voice low but direct. She nodded, wary, gripping her backpack strap tightly. "I want to marry you," he said bluntly, watching her reaction. Her eyes widened behind the shadows of the box. Around them, a small group of children stopped talking, staring in astonishment. "Is this some kind of joke?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "It's not a joke. It's a proposal, and I want your answer now." Chiamaka glanced around, as if searching for an escape. After a few seconds, she replied, "Yes." He gave a half smile, not expecting her to agree so quickly. He didn't know then that her answer had nothing to do with love, and everything to do with a desperate escape from a life he had yet to discover. And so, in an impulse to wound his mother's pride, he set in motion the story that would change everything. Now, sitting in the present years later, he began telling himself and anyone who cared to listen how a simple act of rebellion became his greatest regret and the most shocking revelation of his life. "You said yes too quickly." Tox's voice broke the silence in the car as he drove away from the school. The sound of the engine and the faint hum of the village in the distance were the only soundtrack. Chiamaka, curled up in the passenger seat, kept her hands clasped in her lap. The box still covered her head, tilted slightly downward. "I had no reason to refuse," she said, her tone carrying neither joy nor excitement. He let out a short, humorless laugh. "You don't even know me. You don't know who I am." "I know enough," she replied, still not looking at him. His gaze flicked to her, trying to catch some sign through the shadow cast by the box. That dry answer stirred something unexpected in him, a sharp pang of curiosity. "Then tell me, why did you say yes?" he asked, this time more seriously. She took her time to respond. She breathed deeply, as if weighing each word. "Because I need to get out of where I live. And you just gave me the first way out I've seen in years." Tox frowned. "What's so bad about your home?" "Everything." The word came heavy, with a bitterness he hadn't expected. Silence hung for a few seconds, and he could sense there was far more to the story. "My mother died when I was born," she began, her voice low. "Since then, I was raised by the wife my father married afterward. My stepmother never accepted me." He kept his eyes on the road, but his ears were locked on every word. "She used to say I was ugly, that my face shamed the family. She put this box on my head when I was 8 years old, and never let me take it off outside my bedroom. If anyone asked, she said I had a deformity." The image of a little girl forced to carry a weight on her head for years stirred something in him he didn't want to admit. "And your father?" he asked, trying to understand. "My father died 4 years ago. Since then, she's been in charge of everything. She works all day, but when she gets home, she takes her anger out on me. I can't go out, I can't talk to anyone. School is the only place I can breathe, even with everyone laughing at me." Tox tightened his grip on the steering wheel. "So, when you agreed to marry me, I saw a chance." She cut him off without hesitation. "It doesn't matter if you love me or not, I just need to get out of there." He didn't know what to say. His plan had been simple: defy his mother, cause a scandal, and prove he could choose for himself. But now, with every word Chiamaka spoke, he realized he had stepped into something much bigger and much more serious. "Do you understand what you're doing?" he asked, almost as a final warning. "I understand that with you, at least I won't get beaten every night," she replied, and this time her tone cracked just enough to let some of the pain slip through. They stayed silent until they reached a small cafe outside the village. He parked, turned off the engine, and faced her. "I'm going to help you." She shook her head. "You don't have to promise me anything. I just want to leave." "It's not a promise," he said firmly. "It's a decision." She took a deep breath, and for a moment her tense body seemed to relax just slightly. As they had a quick drink in the cafe, Tox couldn't stop watching her. The box on her head drew attention, but it was the way she moved, always looking down, always calculating every step, that unsettled him more. This wasn't ordinary shyness, it was survival. Back in the car, he pulled out his phone and called Kunle. "Get everything ready for the registry office tomorrow," he said, offering no further explanation. Kunle laughed on the other end. "You're serious?" "More than ever." In that moment, though, Tox knew the decision was no longer just about wounding his mother's pride. It was about taking this girl out of a place where each day was a prison. And though he wouldn't say it out loud, part of him wanted to know what lay behind that box and behind the silent resistance she carried. When he dropped her off in front of the school so she could pick up some books, he watched her disappear through the gate, vanishing among the children. The conversation they'd had echoed in his mind like a warning. This wasn't going to be just a game of rebellion, and deep down, an uneasy feeling began to grow. He had pulled on a thread and knew that sooner or later, the whole fabric would unravel. "Please, sign here." "And here," the registry clerk said, sliding the papers across the wooden desk. The fountain pen made a dry click as Tox picked it up. He glanced to the side. Chiamaka sat with her hands resting in her lap, the box still on her head. She barely lifted her chin, her body rigid, as if she wanted to take up as little space as possible. Tox signed his name quickly, pushed the paper toward her, and waited. From beneath the box, only her thin fingers emerged to take the pen. She hesitated for a moment, then completed her signature with simple strokes, handing the document back to the clerk. "Congratulations. You are now husband and wife," the man said with a formal smile. Tox simply thanked him, but noticed Chiamaka didn't react. There was no sparkle in her eyes, no shy smile, just the same hidden, untouched expression he was beginning to recognize as her armor. They left the registry under Lagos's blazing sun. The street was bustling, street vendors calling out about fruits and fabrics, children running back and forth. He opened the car door for her, and she stepped in without a word. The drive to the small apartment he had rented as their first home was silent. It wouldn't be the mansion. He knew bringing Chiamaka there now would mean an open war with his mother, and he wasn't ready for that yet. When they arrived, he unlocked the apartment door. It was modest but clean, with new furniture and the faint scent of freshly polished wood. "So, this is where we'll live for now," he said, trying to break the ice. She stepped in slowly, looking around but showing no sign of surprise or excitement. The box remained firmly on her head. "You're not going to take it off?" he asked, pointing to it. She shook her head. "Not here. Not yet." He sighed. "All right. Make yourself at home." The next day, a small religious wedding took place. No party, no guests, except Kunli, who acted as witness. The ceremony was brief, and Chiamaka kept the box on the entire time, to the pastor's astonishment. When it was over, Kunli pulled him aside. "Are you sure you know what you're getting into?" "No," he replied with a half smile, "but it's too late to turn back now." As expected, his mother didn't show up. Instead, she sent a short text. "This won't last. You're making a mistake." In their first days together, Tox tried to build some connection. He brought her coffee, asked about her childhood, offered to take her around the city, but she rarely engaged in conversation. Her answers were short, sometimes just a nod. He began to realize life with her was nothing like he had imagined. There was no intimacy, no closeness. It was like living with a shadow, silent, present, but unreachable. One afternoon, while he worked on his laptop in the living room, he heard light footsteps in the kitchen. He walked over and found her cooking rice. The box still covered her face. "You wear that even to cook?" he asked, trying to smile. "It's easier this way," she replied without looking up. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "I don't get it. You're with me now. You don't have to." "I do," she cut in sharply, ending the subject. The rumors started to reach him. Friends mentioned that in the village, some said his wife's face was deformed, others claimed she was hiding a curse. He tried to ignore it, but the words gnawed at him. His mother's jabs didn't stop either. One night, she called. "I hear your mystery wife is still hiding. How long are you going to keep up this farce, Adeto Kunbo?" "It's not a farce. It's her way," he replied, trying to end the conversation. "It's shame, and you know it," she shot back before hanging up. Over time, the apartment began to feel heavier. Conversations grew rarer, silences stretched longer. He noticed Chiamaka often stayed near the window, as if watching the world outside but never daring to step into it. Without admitting it, he began to wonder if he had made a mistake, not by marrying her, but by failing to break through the invisible wall she had built between them. And as time went by, the box remained, unchanged, a constant reminder that there was something in her he still didn't know, and maybe wasn't ready to find out. "Aren't you even going to try it?" Tox asked, setting the plate of grilled fish on the kitchen table. Chiamaka shook her head, her hands resting in her lap. "I'm not hungry." He sat down, watching her in silence for a few seconds. Since the wedding, she had kept the same habits, the box on her head, her hunched posture, and short answers that built an invisible wall between them. At first, he had tried to believe that, with time, it would change, but the days dragged on, and the distance only grew. "You barely eat," he said, picking up his fork. "You're going to get sick." "I'm fine," she replied flatly. Tox sighed, looking down at his plate. The atmosphere in the apartment had already been heavy, but in recent weeks it had become almost unbearable. He left early for work and came home at night to find the same scene. Her sitting in the same corner, staring out the window, as if waiting for something outside to come for her. The outside provocations didn't help. A family friend had mentioned during a business lunch that his mystery wife was becoming a joke in certain circles, and his mother, always ready to twist the knife, called at least twice a week. "So she still won't show her face?" Funmilayo's voice dripped with a mix of sarcasm and contempt. "You must be very proud of this union." "It's none of your business," he replied curtly. "It is. You're my son, and everything you do reflects on this family. This woman is embarrassing you, and you're too blind to see it." Tox hung up before his mother's poison had time to spread further. But even when he avoided the conversation, her words echoed in his mind. One late afternoon, coming home early from work, he found Chiamaka on the balcony, holding a damp cloth and carefully wiping the edges of the box. She didn't notice he was watching. When she realized he was there, she quickly set the cloth aside and stepped back inside. "You spend all day with that," he said, closing the door behind him. "Don't you ever want to be free of it?" "It's not that simple," she replied, walking toward the bedroom. "It is simple," he insisted, following her. "You're with me now. No one's going to force you to do anything." She stopped at the bedroom door but didn't turn around. "You don't know what people are capable of when they're jealous." The sentence hung in the air. He wanted to ask more, but she stepped inside and shut the door. At work, Tox also began to feel the sting of gossip. A colleague, thinking he was being funny, said, "They say your wife's a cursed princess. When are you going to break the spell?" He shot him a cold look, but inside, anger burned. This wasn't just about him, it was about what they were doing to her. He decided to try again to reach her. He bought a new dress, dark blue, and left it on the bed. "I thought you could wear this to dinner tomorrow," he told her. She looked at the fabric, ran her hand slowly over it, but said nothing. Instead, she returned the dress neatly folded the next morning, offering no explanation. His mother's pressure and Chiamaka's walls began to wear him down. He wondered how much longer he could keep the relationship going without answers. One night, Funmilayo showed up unannounced. She knocked hard on the door, and when Tox opened it, she walked in without waiting for an invitation. "So this is where you're hiding with her?" she said, glancing around with disdain. Chiamaka was in the kitchen, and when she saw her mother-in-law, she instinctively stepped back. "Still with that ridiculous box?" Funmilayo scoffed. "Do you really think you can be part of this family like that?" "Mother, that's enough!" Tox stepped forward, blocking her path. "You didn't come here to humiliate anyone. I came to open your eyes. You're sinking, and this woman is dragging you down with her." Chiamaka slipped quietly out the back door while they argued. By the time Tox noticed, she was no longer in the apartment. He found her an hour later, sitting on a bench in the square, watching a group of children playing soccer. "Why did you leave like that?" he asked, sitting beside her. "Because I don't want to be the reason you fight," she said, her voice tired. "I've lived through that before." In that moment, he understood that what was happening between them wasn't just about the present. It was about wounds she had been carrying for years. And though he didn't say it out loud, he began to fear that those wounds might be too deep for him to ever reach. "She'll come. I've made sure of it." Funmilayo's voice sounded confident over the phone as she adjusted the gold bracelet on her wrist. On the other end of the line, Neka, Chiamaka's stepmother, let out a low chuckle. "Don't worry. I've already told her it's a good opportunity for her to fit in with your family." "Perfect. I'll make sure she's the center of attention," Funmilayo said before hanging up. The satisfied smile on her face carried nothing kind. That same evening, Tox arrived at the apartment to find Chiamaka sitting in the living room. She seemed uneasy, fidgeting with her fingers. "Your mother invited me to a dinner," she said without looking directly at him. He raised an eyebrow. "A dinner? She never mentioned anything to me. She said it would be a way to get to know me better, and that it would be important for you." Tox took a deep breath. "I'm sure that's not what she really wants, but if you want to go, I'll be there to protect you." Chiamaka stayed silent for a few seconds before nodding. "I'll go." The day of the dinner arrived. The venue Funmilayo had chosen was a luxurious hall in a downtown Lagos hotel. Chandeliers glistened over perfectly set tables, and waiters moved about with silver trays. When Tox and Chiamaka walked in, every head turned toward them. She wore a simple light blue dress, but as always, the box covered her head. He led her to the central table, where Funmilayo waited with a cold smile. "I'm so glad you came, dear," she said, rising to greet her. "Please sit." The first hour was filled with subtle but cutting remarks. Funmilayo asked about the tradition of the box, feigning curiosity in front of other guests, who chuckled discreetly. "It must be uncomfortable to wear that all the time, isn't it?" a woman at the table asked, staring at the box as if it were a museum artifact. "It's my choice," Chiamaka replied, trying to keep her composure. The peak of the trap came when a waiter approached with a bottle of wine. With a theatrical gesture, Funmilayo touched his shoulder and said, "Please serve her." The man, clearly coached, leaned in to pour, but deliberately spilled a few drops onto Chiamaka's dress. She stood quickly, and before she could react, one of the female guests stepped forward with a napkin, pretending to help while at the same time reaching for the box. Tox stepped in front of her, grabbing the woman's arm. "That's enough!" he said loudly enough to silence the table. But the damage was done. Some guests whispered, others laughed under their breath. Chiamaka's face remained hidden, but her shoulders trembled. "Let's go," he said, taking her hand. Outside, on the sidewalk lit by the hotel's lights, she pulled her hand away. "I shouldn't have come. I told you my mother wouldn't make it easy," he said, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "This was a setup." "It's not just that," she said, her voice trembling. "I can't take this anymore." That night she slept in the bedroom while he stayed in the living room, unable to close his eyes. By morning, the bedroom was empty. The box was on the bed, but she was nowhere to be found. Panicked, he called Kunle, neighbors, even went to the village, but no one had news. Then, days later, he received an unexpected visit. Neka. "You really thought a girl like her would stay with you forever," she said with a poisonous smile. "She ran off with a man she met months ago." "You're lying," Tox replied, though his stomach twisted. "Believe what you want," she said, turning her back and leaving. With no proof to contradict the story, and everyone around him ready to believe the worst, Tox withdrew into silence. Deep down, something in him screamed that it wasn't true. But Chiamaka's absence was an open wound he didn't know how to close. The sound of clinking glasses and muffled voices filled the meeting room. Tox sat at the head of a long glass table, flipping through a stack of contracts. One of his directors was explaining profit figures and projections for the next quarter, but the words seemed to drift past him. "Mr. Adeyemi?" The director's voice pulled him back. "We need your approval for the expansion project." "Yes, of course. Leave it on my desk," he replied, not really registering what he was signing. In recent years, his life had become exactly this: meetings, paperwork, decisions, and lonely nights. Since Chiamaka had left, he had thrown himself into work, trying to fill the void she had left behind. Yet no matter how much the numbers grew, the sense of loss remained untouched. When the meeting ended, he walked to his office. The city stretched out before him through the glass wall, skyscrapers glowing in the afternoon sun. He grabbed a cup of coffee and sat in the armchair, glancing at the newspaper his assistant had left. And then he saw it. On the cover of the business section, a photograph caught his eye. A young woman in a simple but elegantly cut white dress, smiling as she cut the ribbon at a store opening. Beside the photo, the headline read, "Nigerian entrepreneur returns home, vows to transform the fashion industry." Tox felt his heart pound. The smile, the shape of the eyes, the posture. He knew that expression. He picked up the paper with both hands, bringing the image closer. No box on her head. Her hair, loose and softly wavy, framed a face he hadn't seen in years, but had never forgotten: Chiamaka. He read the article quickly. It spoke of the CEO of Amaka Designs, a brand of handmade clothing and accessories that had gained ground in the international market. It mentioned she had spent years abroad, learning design and management techniques, and was now investing in social projects for women in vulnerable situations. "It's her," he murmured to himself. In an instant, a rush of memories came back. The day he met her outside the school, the ever-present box, the sudden disappearance, the lies he'd been told about her. And now, here she was, in front of his eyes, transformed. He grabbed his phone and called Kunle. "Did you see today's paper?" he asked, straight to the point. "I did. You mean that new businesswoman? She's a hit around here. Why?" "Because she's Chiamaka." There was a brief silence on the other end. "You're sure?" "Absolutely." He looked at the photo again. "I want to know where her next event will be." Kunle promised to find out. Minutes later, he sent a message with a link. "Charity event in the CEO's hometown, fundraiser for educational project." Tox's heart beat faster. The same village, the same place she had left to marry him and to run away. He decided he would go. Not as a businessman, not as a formal guest, but as a man who needed, once and for all, to know the whole truth. In the days that followed, her image lingered in his mind like a shadow. Each night, he looked at the newspaper on his bedside table. He couldn't stop wondering what had happened in the years she was gone, and why she had never tried to reach him. On the morning of the event, he put on a simple suit and drove alone. The road to the village seemed smaller than he remembered, but each curve brought back old memories. The square where he'd found her sitting after his mother's first visit, the market where he'd overheard the laughter about the girl with the box. When he arrived, the place was decorated with colorful fabrics and flowers. A small stage had been set up in the center, and a crowd was gathering. Children ran around, men and women chatted, and everyone seemed eager. He saw her before she even stepped onto the stage. Chiamaka stood beside an elderly woman with a wrinkled face, holding her hand warmly. The dress she wore had delicate embroidery, and her smile seemed to light up everything around her. No box, no trace of shame, only the confident presence of a woman who had found her place in the world. Tox stood still, watching from a distance, feeling as though time was folding in on itself. The quiet, hidden girl he had once known was there, transformed and somehow out of reach. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our special guest, the founder of Amaka Designs, Chiamaka Obi. The master of ceremonies announced, and applause rippled across the square, decorated with colorful fabrics and banners. Standing at the back, Tox felt his body react instantly. His heart pounded, but his feet seemed anchored to the packed earth. He watched as she walked to the center of the stage with steady steps, greeting the crowd with a bright smile. The microphone carried her clear voice. "It's good to be back home." The audience responded with cheers and applause. She spoke about the educational project she planned to launch in the village, about job opportunities for local women, and about the pride she felt at having started right there on that very ground. Tox noticed that when she spoke of her hardships, there was no bitterness, only a calmness that seemed hard-won. After the speech came the greetings. Lines formed, children handed her flowers, elderly women clasped her hands, and she returned every gesture with genuine warmth. Tox moved closer, blending into the crowd. When his turn finally came, she was just finishing with a young mother. As she lifted her eyes and saw him, Chiamaka froze for a moment. "Tox," she said, almost in a whisper. He nodded. "Chiamaka." A brief silence followed, heavy with memories and unanswered questions. She quickly composed herself and gave him a polite smile. "I didn't expect to see you here." "I didn't expect to be here," he replied, keeping his voice low. "But when I saw your picture in the paper, I couldn't stay away." She gestured toward a quieter spot behind the stage where they could talk without drawing attention. The music and chatter muffled their words from passers-by. "You've changed a lot," he said, studying her closely, "not just on the outside." "Time does that to us," she replied, folding her arms, "and distance too." He drew a deep breath. "I spent years wondering what happened. That day you were just gone, and all I heard were lies." Chiamaka looked out toward the square, where children were playing. "I didn't run away with anyone, Tox. I ran away from everything. From your mother, from my stepmother, from the humiliation, from a life where I had no voice." He took a step closer. "I would have gone with you. You couldn't save me that way. I had to learn how to save myself," she said, her eyes shining, not with anger, but with conviction. For a moment, they simply stared at each other, each weighing the weight of their own words. Then an elderly woman approached, Mama Folake, the village elder. She held a carved walking stick and wore a warm smile. "I knew you two would meet again," she said, looking first at Chiamaka, then at Tox. "Destiny loves to play tricks, but it also loves to bring together what needs to be joined." Chiamaka took the elder's hand. "She's the one who told me years ago that my life would change, that one day I'd be happy. When everyone laughed at me, she believed." Mama Folake gave her shoulder a gentle pat. "And I was right. Look at you now." As they spoke, Tox noticed something striking. There was no resentment in Chiamaka's tone. She talked about the past as someone who had walked a hard road and reached the other side, not wishing to return, but not dragging the weight like a chain. When the elder stepped away, he asked, "And now, what's next for you?" "To keep going," she said simply. "To expand the project, to help other girls avoid what I went through." He hesitated before asking, "And for us?" She looked at him for a few seconds, as if weighing the question. A faint smile touched her lips. Maybe destiny still has something in store. But today isn't the day we'll find out. At that moment, a group of children ran up to her, asking to take pictures. Chiamaka stepped away to be with them, and Tox remained where he was, watching. He understood at last that the woman before him was no longer the girl with the box on her head. She was someone who had weathered the storm and found her place in the sun, and he didn't know if he would be part of that new horizon. But for the first time in years, he felt peace, seeing her exactly where she deserved to be. I still remember the day she spoke to me, Chiamaka said, walking beside Tox along the narrow dirt road leading to the elder's house. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange, and the air carried the scent of burning wood. He glanced at her. "Who?" "Mama Folake," she replied with a soft smile. "I must have been about 16. I was sitting by the side of the road, waiting for my stepmother to return from the market. I had just heard a group of children call me the girl with the box and the village ghost. I wanted to disappear." The sound of steady footsteps echoed ahead, and soon Mama Folake appeared at the entrance of her house, holding her carved walking stick. "I thought you two were going to get lost on the way," she said with humor. "We came to thank you," Chiamaka said, stepping forward and taking the elder's hands, "for everything." They went inside the simple but welcoming home, its walls covered in colorful fabrics and shelves lined with clay pots. They sat around a small wooden table. The elder served ginger tea sweetened with honey. "Do you remember what you told me that day?" Chiamaka asked. Mama Folake chuckled, her eyes bright. "I've said many things to many people, my child, but to you—" She paused, as if the words had returned fresh to her memory. "I told you that one day your destiny would change, that your beauty, and I don't just mean the outside, would light up the world, and that you would be happy." "And I didn't believe you," Chiamaka admitted. "I was hidden under that box, carrying all the weight of humiliation and anger. I didn't think change was possible." "But it happened," the elder said, squeezing her hands, "because you had the courage to leave." Tox watched the scene in silence. There was something in the way Chiamaka spoke to Mama Folake that made him feel part of her story could only be understood in this space, within these walls. "She was the only person who believed in me," Chiamaka went on. "Not even I believed." Mama Folake turned to Tox. "And you? What have you learned from all this?" He drew a slow breath. "I learned that wanting to protect someone isn't enough if you're not ready to fight what's really hurting them. I thought marrying her would solve everything. I was wrong." The elder nodded. "Sometimes it's not about being the savior. It's about giving space for the other to save themselves." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind where each person sat with their own thoughts. Outside, the crickets had begun their evening chorus. "You know, Tox," Chiamaka said, breaking the moment, "I carried a lot of resentment for a long time. For my stepmother, for your mother, for the people who laughed at me. Even for you, for putting me in a position I never asked for. But I learned that carrying it is like keeping the box on my head, heavy, suffocating, and useless." He studied her face. "And now I've left it behind," she said, and there was truth in every syllable. "And I'm not putting it back on." Mama Folake smiled, lifting her teacup. "That's how you live." When they left the house, night had fallen. The village was quiet except for the distant sound of a drum, likely from some celebration. They walked side by side down the dirt road. "I don't know if we met again by chance or by destiny," Tox said, looking up at the full moon lighting their way. Chiamaka smiled. "Maybe a bit of both, but we don't have to decide anything today." He nodded. "I just wanted you to know that despite everything, I never stopped thinking about you. And I wanted you to know that despite everything, I found what you always said you wanted for me. Freedom." They stopped at the roadside, looking at each other under the moonlight. There were no promises, no guarantees, just a silent understanding that the past would stay behind and the future, together or apart, would be built on the strength they had each found in their own journey. And then they kept walking, each step echoing softly against the ground, carried by the certainty that one way or another they were both exactly where they were meant to be.